On the shimmering purple plains of planet Xylos, a group of young Xylotians, all fluff and curious antennae, were out on their daily foraging lesson. Their names were Kix, Zorp, and Glip, and their teacher, an elder named Mylar, was trying to show them how to properly identify glowing moss from the less tasty, non-glowing kind. Kix, the smallest but most adventurous of the trio, was easily distracted. His large, multifaceted eyes weren't on the moss, but on a strange, glinting object, half buried in the crimson soil some distance away. He nudged Zorp, who was busy sniffing a particularly vibrant patch of moss. "Hey, look over there. What's that shiny thing?" Zorp followed Kix's gaze, and his antennae twitched with interest. Glip, ever cautious, stayed close to Mylar but couldn't help but peek. The object was unlike anything they'd ever seen. It was sleek, metallic, and broken, with strange markings on its side that looked like scratches from a giant claw. With a shared, silent agreement, the three cubs scurried away from the lesson, their little legs carrying them quickly across the plain. As they got closer, they saw it was a crashed vessel, much smaller than the great star wanderers that sometimes streaked across their sky. A hatch was ajar, hanging open like a silent invitation. Curiosity overwhelming their caution, they clambered inside. The interior was a mess of wires and blinking, dead lights. But it was a smell that truly captured their attention. It was a strange, savory aroma, completely foreign to their world of sweet nectar and earthy fungi. Following their noses, they found a small, sealed container. Zorp, who had the strongest claws, managed to pry it open. Inside was a peculiar object. It was layered with soft brownish fluffy material on the top and bottom. In between were slices of green, leafy things, a circle of a reddish substance, and a slab of a pale yellow material. It was, of course, a human sandwich. A classic ham and cheese, to be precise, perfectly preserved in its vacuum-sealed container. They stared at it, their antennae vibrating with a mix of confusion and intrigue. Kix, being the bravest, reached out a tentative claw and poked the bread. It was soft. He then poked the cheese. It was firm. Finally, he gave the entire thing a good sniff. The smell was intoxicating, a complex bouquet of flavors they had no names for. "What is it?" Glip whispered, his eyes wide. "I don't know," Zorp replied, "but it smells ... interesting." Kix, driven by an insatiable curiosity, decided on the ultimate test. He carefully tore off a small corner of the bread and cheese and popped it into his mouth. His eyes went wide and his antennae shot straight up. A symphony of sensations exploded on his tongue. The savory, salty taste of the ham, the creamy tang of the cheese, and the soft, slightly sweet bread. It was a revelation. He let out a little squeak of delight. It's amazing," he chirped. Encouraged by Kix's reaction, Zorp and Glip took their own tentative bites. Their reactions were identical. They had never tasted anything so complex, so satisfying. They quickly devoured the rest of the strange food, arguing playfully over the last few crumbs. Forgetting all about their foraging lesson, they spent the next hour exploring the rest of the crashed ship, hoping to find more of this magical sustenance. They found nutrient paste packets and water purifiers, but nothing could compare to the layered wonder they had just consumed. As the twin suns of Xylos began to set, casting long, dancing shadows across the plains, the three friends decided it was time to head back. They were just about to leave the wreck when a low growl echoed from the entrance. A shadow fell over the open hatch. Blocking their exit was a grolak, one of Xylos's most feared predators. It was a hulking beast with thick leathery hide, rows of sharp teeth, and a notoriously bad temper. Its beady eyes were fixed on the three small cubs, and it licked its chops with a menacing grin. Fear seized them. They were trapped. The grolak was too big, too strong. They huddled together, trembling. Mylar and the others were too far away to help. As the grolak took a step into the shuttle, its growl rumbling in its chest, Kix's mind raced. He remembered the sandwich. He remembered the powerful, overwhelming smell, and then he had an idea. It was a crazy idea, but it was the only one they had. He frantically searched the compartment where they'd found the sandwich. His claws scrambled against the metal until they hit another sealed container. He tugged it free. It was another sandwich. This one looked different, packed with a dark, pungent paste and some sort of pickled vegetation. It was a Vegemite sandwich. With a surge of adrenaline, Kix tore open the package. The aroma that filled the small cabin was instantaneous and overwhelming. If the ham and cheese sandwich was a pleasant melody, this was a full-blown orchestral blast. The thick, salty, and intensely savory smell of Vegemite hit the Grolak like a physical blow. The creature, whose sense of smell was 1,000 times more sensitive than the cubs, recoiled instantly. It let out a yelp of confusion and disgust. Its nose, accustomed to the subtle scents of the Xyloian ecosystem, was completely assaulted by the yeast extract. "Throw it," Kix yelled. Zorp, understanding the plan, grabbed the sandwich and, with all his might, hurled it straight at the Grolak's face. It landed with a splat, right on the predator's snout. The Grolak roared, not in anger this time, but in pure, unadulterated olfactory shock. It shook its massive head wildly, trying to dislodge the offending substance. It clawed at its face, smearing the dark paste everywhere. The smell was just too much for it to handle. With a final pathetic whimper, the mighty Grolak turned and fled from the shuttle, stumbling blindly back into the wilderness, desperate to escape the horrifying stench. The three cubs stood in stunned silence for a moment, watching the predator disappear. Then, they burst into cheers. They had done it. They had faced down a Grolak and won, not with claws or teeth, but with a sandwich. It was absurd, it was hilarious, and it was brilliant. They looked at each other, their faces smeared with a little bit of triumph and a lot of relief. When they finally returned to their village, they were hailed as heroes. They recounted their adventure, much to the disbelief and then amazement of the elders. Mylar was especially proud, though he did give them a stern lecture about wandering off. But the story of the Grolak and the stinky weapon spread like wildfire. The cubs had brought back the empty wrappers and the other unopened container, which turned out to be a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. This encounter sparked something new in their culture. Inspired by the human concept of combining different ingredients to create new flavors, the Xyloians began to experiment. They had always eaten things separately: the nectar of the lumina flower, the crunchy spores of the ground fungus, the tangy leaves of the whisper vine. Now they started combining them. Kix, Zorp, and Glip became pioneers of this new culinary movement. They tried wrapping savory moss around sweet crystal berries. They mashed up root vegetables and mixed them with spicy nectar, spreading the paste onto large, flat leaves. They created their own version of a layered meal, a stack, as they called it. Some experiments were disastrous, like the attempt to mix bitter bark with sour sap. But others were incredible, creating flavors and textures no one had ever imagined. Their little village became famous for its innovative food. Xyloians from all over the planet traveled to taste their creations. The crash site of the human shuttle was declared a historical landmark, a monument to the day a simple sandwich changed the course of their civilization. And it all started with three curious cubs, and the accidental discovery that the universe was full of flavors they had yet to imagine. They learned that sometimes the greatest discoveries aren't found in the stars, but between two slices of bread. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this little trip to Planet Xylos, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from across the galaxy. Let us know in the comments what kind of sandwich you think would scare off an alien predator. We'll see you in the next one.